everybody, and welcome to Guiding Star Astrology. Today, we have a very special interview to share with you with David Warner Mathisen. Thank you so much for joining us, David.
Thank you, Ksenia. It's great to be here.
Now, as many of you know, if you've seen my previous interviews with David, David is a master of mythology and stars, astrotheology, some people call it, but you have a different title that you like to give yourself, David. What's that?
Well, I do use the term astrotheology sometimes. I did write one book with that title, Astrotheology for Life, in 2017. But I really like to call what I do exploring the world's ancient star myths. I think the word star myths is a little more universal than astrotheology, because the word theology tends to have connotations typically with Christianity. And also astrotheology, if you look it up on the internet and search around for it, you'll mostly find people who are trying to apply the connection of the stars to the stories in the Bible. And so astrotheology typically focuses almost exclusively on, well, the Bible is based on the stars, which it is, but it is based on the stars in common with the myths around the world. The ancient myths of every continent and inhabited continent and island on our planet are based on the stars. So that includes the stories in the Bible, but it also includes the myths of ancient Greece, ancient Egypt, ancient Mesopotamia, ancient Australia.
So much more than astrotheology.
Africa,
you do.
Right. So I like to say, ask a small question, get a long answer, but I like to call it star myths. And so I say I'm a star myth explorer. That's what I've been doing for the past, well, over a dozen years now, exploring the world's just this precious inheritance in the myths and the evidence that they are connected to this ancient worldwide system that's based on the stars.
I love it. The Star Myth Explorer sounds so adventurous, like you're off to you're off to explore the stars. Like
it is an adventure.
It is wonderful.
And we're all on an adventure. So that's what the myths are there for, our benefit on this journey that we're all going through.
Yeah, beautiful. And you've written 9 books. You have an amazing blog / website with so many articles about this topic, and a YouTube channel that's just flourishing, full of incredible examples of your star myth research. So I'll put a link in the description below to your websites, and you also have a thinkific page, undyingstars.com, where you do courses for people who want to learn more about this ancient wisdom. I'll put links in the description below for people who want to access your amazing work. But we're actually,
Thanks.
You're welcome. We're actually here today to talk about an event that we're both going to be attending in late April in Utah, which is very, very exciting. We'll probably talk about that event towards the end of this video, but you do stick around, everybody, to find out more about how you can join us for a star myth exploration with David and also with myself in Utah in late April. But Dave, you have some things that you like to share with us about the star myths and the explorations that you've been doing. Can I handball it, as we do in Australian rules football, handball it over to you to take over from here?
Sure, thanks. Well, so I have a little presentation and we'll talk about some of those subjects that I cover in the courses and in the books that you mentioned. And the concept that the world's ancient myths are based on the stars, when you say that, people might, I always say, people kind of tend to hear that when I say the world's ancient myths, including the Bible, they're all tied together. They're all based on the stars. And then people go, yeah, that sounds really interesting. Or, yeah, I probably agree with that. What exactly are you talking about? Because it's, it sounds so, almost, yeah, that seems like it just makes sense. But what do I mean? What I mean is that the figures in those stories, the gods and goddesses or the heroes in the Odyssey or the Iliad or the myths of ancient India, the Mahabharata, which has all these different figures who are battling and going through different adventures, whether they're humans or gods, goddesses, princes, kings, queens. Those individual characters line up with specific constellations, often zodiac constellations, not always zodiac constellations, but it is using this system in which the heavenly cycles that you and your viewers are familiar with, about the cycles of the sun moving through the background stars of the zodiac, but also the planets move through that same band of the sky, the zodiac, the moon. Those cycles, those heavenly cycles, are imbued with significance, with esoteric significance. In other words, this part of the cycle represents something else. It's a metaphor. Like, we just crossed over, as I'm sure all your viewers are aware, we just crossed over one of the crossing points of the year, one of the equinox points. So the sun crossed from the upper half to the lower half, if you're in the southern hemisphere, or for us in the northern hemisphere, from the lower half of the year, I call it the lower half, to the upper half. What do I mean? When the days become longer than nights. Up until that crossing point, hours of daylight were shorter than hours of darkness here in the northern hemisphere. So you can imbue that or invest that or attribute characteristics or meaning to that crossing. Like, now we're going into the side of the year, the half of the year where daylight rules. Well, that could have significance for spiritual matters. We could explain spiritual matters using these cycles. So that's what these ancient myths are doing. So when they use a specific character who may be associated with Sagittarius, there's all kinds of connotations or connections with Sagittarius. So with that said, I'm just trying to introduce a little bit.
Yeah.
If you want to interrupt or
not at all. No, it's wonderful.
Respond to any of that. Let me share my screen.
It's really helpful to understand what you mean by the star, the myths are in the sky, and how we can apply that to our lives. So please continue.
Yeah, thanks. And I'll just show a few examples here, some of which, maybe your viewers have seen me talk about before, but maybe some that they haven't. But what I'll say is that there are endless examples. Like, we could go through the book of Genesis in the Bible, the very first book of all the 66 books that got included in the Bible. And we could spend, I always say I could literally write 10 books on Genesis alone, those characters matching up, Jacob and Esau or Abraham and Isaac with specific constellations. A lot of people know that the different children of Israel, Jacob, Israel, number 12 in number. Well, it's actually more complicated than that, but the children of Israel, there's a couple of different passages where they are described with features or characteristics that anyone who understands astrology would say, oh, wait a minute, some of those sound very like the zodiac. Like, Judah is a lion's whelp. Oh, a lion. Do we have one of those in the zodiac? Anyway, what I'm saying is, I'm just going to scratch the surface here, but let me show a few examples. So I'm sharing my screen, and here we are on the 22nd of March, 2023, with Ksenia of Guiding. You can edit that part. Guiding Star Astrology. And I understand it's 23 March where you are, but it's 22 March here in California. So let me show some examples of what I'm talking about. And I'm going to try and relate it to what your listeners already know and show how it connects. So here's this beautiful photograph I found on the internet. This is apparently taken in Indonesia. Look at that beautiful dusk sky with the stars beginning to come out and the mist lying over the ocean there, and some volcanic looking mountains or islands popping up out of the mist. And I just used that as a background so you could see this zodiac symbol. I'm going to put up a zodiac symbol on the screen. And what I want your viewers to do is take out a piece of paper and write down which zodiac sign this symbol is associated with. And you're not allowed to say because you're the expert. Okay, here we go. So this should be really easy. This is just one of the zodiac signs, but this symbol has all kinds of connotations for someone who knows astrology. Probably your viewers are thinking, oh, okay, I know that sign. I know whether it's mutable or fixed. I know whether it's fire or water. I know so much about this sign. So write down on your piece of paper what sign this is. And then my next question, this is also very easy. I want you to, on that same piece of paper, take your pencil or pen and just draw out the outlines of that zodiac constellation so that when the sun passes through this particular zodiac station, or the moon, or whether it's rising, maybe it's rising on the eastern horizon. If you saw those stars, just sketch the outline of the stars, if you would, on your piece of paper or napkin or whatever you're using, right underneath the name of the sign that you put down, right? Everybody got that? You got your diagram? See, what I'm making a point, obviously. I'm being obnoxious, but what I'm doing is I'm pointing out, I'm pointing out that we are not taught how to find the actual constellations in the night sky. And we're not taught the arrangement of the stars that go with the constellations of the zodiac, which are very important. You can go through, 12 years of formal education all the way up until you're 18 years old. Then you can go off and enroll in college if you want. You can spend 4 more years, you can get a degree. You'll never, I would guess, most people, the vast majority of people will never, ever get a single class that explains how to find these constellations in the sky. Or even if it's not a formal class, you won't find a teacher who says, hey, there's something I want to tell you, class, that you probably will never, this isn't part of the curriculum, but I'm just going to show on the dry erase board or the chalkboard how to find all the zodiac constellations. Plus, there's a lot more other important constellations too. Anyway, I'm trying to make the point that even people who know astrology very, very well and can tell us all kinds of important things about this particular sign or the others might not be able to find it in the night sky. That's what we're going to be doing on this, visit to Bryce Canyon, Utah, where it's a very dark night sky. We'll be able to see different constellations. But what I'm pointing out is that we are not given the tools to find the constellations and know the outlines of the different stars for the zodiac constellations or the other important ones.
Yeah.
And so therefore, you'll never, without that knowledge, you'll have a very hard time. I won't say never, but you'll have a very, very hard time seeing the connection between these constellations and, let's say, figures in the Bible stories or figures in the Greek myths. So
before I came across your work, I tried to teach myself to recognize certain constellations based on these kind of diagrams here. And I couldn't do it. The only thing I can recognize was Orion, apart from the fact that they're all upside down here in Australia anyway, but it's really, really difficult, even for passionate enthusiasts. But as you're going to show us, there are tricks of the trade.
Yeah, there are some ways that could be more helpful. So this is from the 1800s, but this is one way that we're all probably pretty familiar with, where there's I call it a flowery, very artsy kind of imaginative diagram. But if you hold this picture in your mind and you go out into the night sky, it is not going to help you at all. This is the constellation that goes along with that sign that I showed, which is, of course, Sagittarius. And you can see that the symbol itself is connected to the fact that there's a bow and arrow going on in this constellation. And this is a diagram from I think the early 1800s. It was a book called Urania's Mirror. And it was like, it was like the mirror of the heavens. And it came with kind of like flashcards. I believe this is one of those. They were larger than just a little 3x5 card, but it was a diagram that could help you go out. And it has the stars there. So you can look closely and kind of squint your eyes and ignore the flowery, artistic, full color picture and see a bunch of stars. But that flowery, artistic picture will not help you to recognize any patterns there whatsoever. So this is one extreme that is not very helpful. But then in the 20th century, when things got more modern and, we're going to be like, more Art Deco and just everything's going to be slimmed down. We're going to get away from the flowery, overdrawn 1800s, and we're going to go to the 20th century. Then they come up with these kind of geometric. And by the way, that previous slide with the archer there, the centaur, that was from the early 1800s. This is, that was from the Encyclopedia Britannica also. That picture is, you look up Sagittarius in Encyclopedia Britannica, you'll see that. This is on Wikipedia. You can go on Wikipedia today and find this equally useless. This look at that. You could go out in the night sky. You could, first of all, could you remember that?
No.
Outline? I couldn't. I could stare at that for 6 hours, go outside and not be able to find, not be able to remember it for one thing. But then, even if I did remember it, how would I know if I'm connecting it in the right part of the sky? Because it's like, well, I could probably connect something like that almost anywhere.
Exactly what my difficulty has always been with this sort of thing. Exactly.
And I've mentioned before on different podcasts, I don't know if on our previous visits I've mentioned, but there was an author, a very important author. I consider this author and his wife to be some of the most important authors in modern, English literature. He wrote during the 20th century with his wife, Margaret, a series of books called the Curious George books. And you might laugh, wait a minute, Curious George author, most important writer, because H.A. Rey, his wife Margaret, they both wrote and illustrated the Curious George books, but he also wrote this book called The Stars, A New Way to See Them. And he lamented and complained about, well, we've got two equally terrible ways of depicting the constellations. The one that I just showed you, really artsy. The one that I'm showing you here, really austere and also very unhelpful. And he said, oh, and by the way, here in the Wikipedia, they put it on its side and they tell you, oh, by the way, north is to the left. And so
my goodness, just another way to confuse everybody.
Even more north to the left. Who put that there? Is that supposed to help us in Wikipedia? It's almost like they're trying to make sure you can never find the stars. But this author, H.A. Rey, who along with his wife made the Curious George books, also wrote this book in 1952 called The Stars, A New Way to See Them. And I'm getting so excited. I'm tripping over my words. But this is the outline that H.A. Rey suggested for Sagittarius in 1952 in this book, The Stars, A New Way to See Them. I'm just going to outline it a little more heavily so that you can see it. That is what he said. If you go out in the night sky and look for this outline, you'll be able to find it. And he's right. You can remember there's distinctive features of this constellation that are just characteristic of Sagittarius, one of which is it's got a bow. But I'll show some others in a moment here. But just look at that. It looks almost like a woman wearing a long dress. And you might say, how did a centaur come out of that? I can show you. There's actually a way to turn this, the long dress actually becomes the body of a horse if you add a few more lines to connect to other stars, but I'm not going to go into that right now. I just want to focus on this is Sagittarius the way H.A. Ray said to look for it. I'm going to actually use that same outline and put it on the very unhelpful Wikipedia. There it is. So you can see the bow. You can see that, and you can see there's like this arc of extra stars that goes to almost a little diamond shape
yes.
feature that is actually the tail of the whole. If you connect to that, then the dress part becomes like the body of a horse, and there's another star down there that you could add a leg, and then it becomes a centaur where there's a body of a horse with a torso of a human coming out of it. Yeah,
the archer.
But if you just remember this outline and go out in the night sky at the right time of year, you can find Sagittarius pretty easily. And not only that, these features, these distinctive features, can help you decipher which characters in the Bible are connected with this constellation, which characters in the Greek myth are connected with this constellation. I'm going to just show you one that is very, very revealing. When I went to the Boston Museum of Fine Art in 2016, this bell crater, it's beautiful, large, just a fine piece of artwork from around 540 BC, I believe. But if you look at that, you'll realize, if you know your constellations, you'll look at that and say, wait a minute, this ancient artist must have been reading H.A. Ray's 1952 book, The Stars, A New Way to See Them. This is the drawing of it. I just found this on Wikipedia. This isn't me. I'm not manipulating it in any way. It's just that the bell crater curves around. So this kind of makes it flat. This is a scene from Greek mythology of the goddess Artemis in her encounter with the unfortunate prince named Actaeon, who happened to stumble across Artemis bathing with her nymphs in a grotto while he was done hunting. And he was out hunting. He was done hunting. He was tired. He was hot. He said, I'm going to go for a little walk in the woods. Since I'm the prince, you guys take care of all the deer that I shot and take care of the dogs, and I'll go for a walk in the woods and cool off. And unfortunately for him, he happened to cross the grotto, the little pool, the secluded grove where the goddess Artemis was bathing, and he could not take his eyes off of her. And she did not like the fact that this prince, this mortal, was staring at her while she was naked bathing. And she said, do you like staring at me? And she splashed him with water, according to some of the versions, and he actually turned into a stag, a deer, and his own dogs, pulled him down. But this ancient artist has...
I find that such a heartbreakingly sad story.
It's a terrible story. It's a terrible, terrible story, but it has metaphorical and esoteric significance. Yeah. We can turn into an animal. We can, there are ways in which we are controlled by our impulses, let's say. And how do we overcome that? And there's all kinds of characteristics of the goddess Artemis that are very important. She's a very severe goddess. She protects boundaries, as we'll see in a moment. She's very clear on the lines of proper behavior, and she doesn't like that Actaeon is crossing those lines as a mortal staring at this goddess while she's bathing. So anyway, that's just a brief synopsis of the story, and there's a lot to the story. But if you look at this outline, this ancient artwork from the 500s BC, so 2,500 years ago or more, from ancient Greece, I'll make it a little smaller, and then I'll bring in night sky next to the Milky Way, and there is what we were just looking at, Sagittarius.
Yeah.
Can you see any parallels between the way that ancient artist has depicted the goddess and the outline of Sagittarius.
Oh, it's so similar, even down to whatever it is, the sheath in the back of her.
Yes,
You
yes.
know,
So yeah, so let me show a few. So let me show a really important characteristic of this constellation. So first of all, it's right next to the Milky Way. Can everyone, I hope, see
yeah.
that? That's the brightest part of the Milky Way. That is actually the widest and brightest part of the Milky Way, where it widens out into what they call the galactic core, the galactic center. That is the pool.
Yeah.
The Milky Way could be envisioned as a river. That widest part often plays like a pool, or a grotto. That's where she's bathing. So a lot of times in myth, there'll be a female figure, either a mortal princess or the goddess Artemis or different goddesses, bathing in that pool. So that's important. But another really important aspect, if you look at the constellation on the left, the actual outline, it's also right next to Scorpio. So people who know astrology know that Sagittarius follows Scorpio, or the sun goes through Sagittarius after Scorpio, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can see that the angle of Scorpio is pretty close to the angle of Action. And he's got his arms kind of flung out like the stars of Scorpio. So there's the way H.A. Rey outlines Scorpio.
Brilliant.
And look at that artwork, and then look at the night sky, and you can see this scene on this ancient vase.
It's pretty obvious, isn't it?
It is based on the night sky, but not just that, it's based on the outlines of the constellations, the way H.A. Rey told us, not those other stupid constellations from Encyclopedia Britannica or Wikipedia that aren't helpful at all. If you look at those, you'll never, you could look at this vase from ancient Greece and you'll never say, oh, wow, wait a minute. If all you ever see, that's what I was pointing out with my kind of joking, quiz on please draw the stars. We're not taught the stars. And because we're not taught, or if we are, we're taught a very bad way to see them. Anyway, let me show you a few aspects of that constellation. Look at Sagittarius on the left. Sorry, I put the arrow over on the goddess first. She's walking in one direction, but she's turning back and shooting her bow in the other direction. That is an important aspect of Sagittarius. If you look, it looks like the knees and the feet are in the lower body is going one way, and then the upper body is looking back the other way. So you see how the artist has incorporated that, but you can see it's actually in the stars. And there are myths all over the world where a figure, often a female figure, is walking one way and looking back the other way. For instance, in the biblical story of Lot, when he's leaving Sodom and Gomorrah, the angel says to Lot, make sure no one looks back. If anyone looks back, they don't want to look back. Bad punishment for looking back. Or
and Sagittarius is Lot's wife.
Sagittarius is Lot's wife. And she gets turned into a pillar of salt because she has to look back. She can't help herself. Or Orpheus, when he's leading Eurydice out of the underworld in ancient Greece, he's told by the gods of the underworld, the god of the underworld and Persephone, his consort, we'll let you take her back, but just don't ever look back. If you look back, then we'll know you don't trust us anymore. And of course he does. So that mythical pattern, which is also in the Bible, is found. It's also found. There's passages in the Iliad where the beautiful maiden Briseis is being led away. She's being taken away from Achilles, and she looks back longingly at the tent of Achilles because she really doesn't want to. And it's the exact same thing. The tent is actually Ophiuchus, which is the constellation that's standing right above Scorpio. So anyway, you can see that's what I'm talking about when I say the myths are based specifically on the constellations. And I'll just show you, you mentioned, a very good point about, look at the features that this artist has incorporated. I'll just point out the feet, the way the artist has put the feet match right up with Sagittarius. The bend of the knee matches right up with the constellation. The angle of the bow matches right up with the constellation. The little tassel, whatever that is on her back, I don't know if it's a quiver of arrows or
like a
I joke that
sword.
it looks like a samurai sword, but look at that tassel that the artist has incorporated and this distinctive feature of Sagittarius. So that's what I'm talking about. And
too many coincidences, isn't there?
It's not, this is not, this is intentional.
It is.
This system was known somehow, and yet it's been forgotten. And I've mentioned this, you and I recently appeared on Grimerica, but I'm going to show some other things that we didn't show. But I do want to point this out because you mentioned some very interesting astrological connections to this. Sagittarius being associated with Artemis, or the goddess Artemis being associated with Sagittarius, is really interesting because she is a virgin goddess, but she is the goddess of childbirth in ancient Greece. So this is an ancient hymn from it's called the Orphic hymns to Artemis, or her Roman name, Latin name is Diana. She's described with all these different features. She's a fierce huntress. She's rejoices in the field. She wanders by night. She's associated with the moon. She loves to dwell on woody hills. If you read it, this is a beautiful poem. It was a hymn that you would sing to worship Artemis or to honor her or to invoke her. And actually at the top it says the fumigation from manna. That tells you what to burn, what incense to burn when you chant this hymn. So poetry was actually used, or singing was actually used, to bring the divine. But anyway, what I want to point out is she presides over birth. It says in the line that I've underlined, "You, O Artemis, hear me, Zeus's daughter, O Artemis, who presides over births, although thyself a maid," that is, thyself a virgin, "to labor pangs imparting ready aid." She's there ready to aid the woman in childbirth. She's the one who allows the delivery to happen. And that is significant in this ancient cycle because of where Sagittarius is. I didn't show this in Grimerica because they might not be as familiar with this, but all your viewers will know this is a zodiac wheel. It's from the 1500s. This one happens to be arranged in such a way that the sun goes around it clockwise. You could easily just, you could arrange it the other way too. This is a shorthand. I always say it's like a shorthand way of showing. This isn't the actual heavens. This is a piece of paper. But in this piece of paper, we're going to arrange it so that the sun goes around that way, Cancer, then Leo, then Virgo. So we just crossed those two crossing points. Those are the equinoxes, and I've drawn a horizontal line. The upper half of this wheel, days are longer than nights if what? You're in the northern hemisphere. Everything's upside down for you down there. But as you cross through the September equinox for the northern hemisphere, days will suddenly start becoming shorter than nights, and that will be the lower half. And so the ancient system imparts esoteric meaning to that plunge downward into the shorter, darker half that actually, you might think, and stop me if I'm going too long, but you might think
all the time in the world.
Okay, great. You might, if I were to ask this question, and I'll ask it, just warning you in advance, it's a trick question the way I'm asking it. Which part of the year, if you're setting up your metaphor, days rule the upper half? Daylight prevails. Days are longer, hours of daylight are longer. That's the summertime. And the bottom half is the winter time. Days get shorter, shorter, shorter. We get down to the winter solstice. Darkness rules. Now, which of those two halves would you want to associate with life and which with death? Life with the sunny, longer half, or life with the cold, shorter nights? I mean, shorter days, longer nights. Which one is life and which one is death?
It's quite obvious. We want the longer days and the sunnier days to associate with life.
Yes, but as I said, it's a trick question. See,
Aha.
the ancient system, and I learned this from, there's one author who was born in the 1800s, Alvin Boyd Kuhn is the one author who said, everyone's got it wrong if you think that the ancient system connects longer days with life. That's actually when we plunge down into this incarnate life, we plunge down into ignorance, pain, suffering, darkness, disconnection, all kinds of unpleasant things. In the ancient system, they're saying, look, let me explain to you where you're at. You're not in the celestial realms. You're in a human body with all of its frailties and all of its passions like Action that can get you into trouble, mess you up. And that's the plunge down from the upper half to the lower half was associated with being born into a physical body. And that's the lower half, the lower elements. I know that I don't know much about astrology, but I do know you've got a fire sign, an air sign,
water, and earth.
And now which of those elements, those are the four classical elements, which ones are higher and which ones are lower? Just in the arrangement of I'm just talking the arrangement in nature. Does water seek its highest point? Like when you pour water out, does it tend to float up above the earth?
Lowest? But that's exactly it. Earth and water, the feminine signs, are associated with the earth realm, and that's why in the Bible, God creates man out of spit.
Yes.
And earth, so it's this earth realm. But the masculine signs, and this is not a reflection of gender in any way at all, it's just a definition that's used in astrology, but the masculine signs, fire and air, are of the higher realms.
That's right. And so the divine spark, the soul, the spirit, gets plunged down out of the realm of spirit into a body that's made up of, as you point out very correctly and esoterically and insightfully, our body, and not just in the Bible, but in myths around the world. Prometheus makes men and women out of clay as well. We're described as being made out of clay, which is a combination of the lower elements of earth and water. And so at that plunge down point from the longer half to the shorter, the colder, darker, we're down here in kind of relative darkness, and we have to reconnect with spirit and reconnect with who we are. That's what the myths are using, these cycles in a metaphorical way. So we get plunged down at the point of the plunge down of the year, if that makes sense. But then there's another axis besides the equinoctial axis. Down at the very bottom, we've got the shortest day, and up at the very top, we've got a longest day. If things are getting longer and longer as you go up towards the top and shorter, it stands to reason there is a longest day. That's the summer solstice, which is for the northern hemisphere, the June solstice. And then there is a shortest day. So we've got, I put June solstice, December solstice. Obviously, I'm being
we
very
understand. It's okay.
northern
We're used to this.
But the system envisions the plunge down as the first birth, the physical birth. I'm giving you, some of the keys to the system here. But there is, as we plunge down, things get darker and darker and colder and farther and farther from connection with spirit. And yet there's a turning point. And that turning point, of course, happens at the the shortest day. Things don't get any shorter after that. They turn back upwards. Even though we're still in the lower half, now we're starting to get longer again. That turning point was envisioned as a second birth, but a different kind of birth from the physical birth. it was a second birth. It was a spiritual birth, and it was a virgin birth. In the previous Orphic hymn, I showed you that there's this line that says, "Oh, Artemis, you preside over birth, but you yourself are a virgin. You've never experienced this. You are the second birth." Where does that second birth take place? Look, the first birth takes place after Virgo. That's the first mother. That's the first birth. You plunge down at that equinox, but then it gets darker, 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 down through Libra, down through Scorpio, down through Sagittarius, and then Sagittarius gives birth to a turning.
Yes.
But it's the second birth. It's the spiritual birth. It's the virgin birth. It's the reconnection with self, with spirit. That's why Artemis, associated with Sagittarius, presides over birth, yet she is herself a virgin. This is like just a taste of what I'm talking about with the esoteric meaning of the myths. So that's I'll pause. I've said probably too much already.
No, don't say that. This is just beautiful and such a fresh new way to look at the stars for those of us who are astrologers who aren't used to looking at it through this lens. It's absolutely gorgeous. And for those who are familiar with mythologies where there is a two mothers kind of theme that shows up quite regularly in the Bible and in other places, it makes sense. It draws in a message, a beautiful esoteric message. And so, David, why do you think they use these stories of the stars to impart this tremendous knowledge about the plunge, in this case, the esoteric wisdom of the plunge down and then the rebirth? Why were they using stories to do that?
Yeah, a great question. So first of all, you mentioned, hey, there's two mothers all over the place, and people might be going, wait a minute, what, two mothers in the Bible? Well, there's definitely two Marys in the Jesus story, but that's not necessarily two mothers. But if you think of Abraham, he does have two wives, Sarah and Hagar. And actually in the letters that are attributed to Paul, he talks about, Abraham had two wives. The one was this type of birth, and the other one was this type of a birth. And he says, and by the way, those are symbolic, those are metaphorical, those are esoteric. He tells you that in the letters of Paul. The two mothers there, Sarah and Hagar, represent those two mothers that are, and I talk about that in one of my online courses and
then
other places.
Jacob and his two
Jacob and Esau, yes. That's
Jacob
right.
Goes to find Leah and Rachel, and one he loves and one he does not love.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And they're described in very different ways. So in Isis and Nephthys, if you look at ancient Egyptian pictures of Osiris, there's often two goddesses standing on either side of his casket if he's in the underworld, or on either side behind his throne if he's seated. Sometimes he's wrapped as a mummy, but he's on his throne. But there's two goddesses behind him, not one. It's Isis and Nephthys. You can tell by what they have on their heads. Those symbols have celestial connotations too. But so great point that you can see these two mothers in myths around the world, including in the Bible. But why? And so what I'll say is that sometimes when I or others argue, the ancient myths are based on the stars, sometimes people will say, oh, well, of course, they had to know when to plant their crops, so it just makes sense. So that's why.
It's almost all this esoteric, isn't it?
It's just to help not to plant your Brussels sprouts in the middle of December, when there's a hard frost on. Like, I need these really complicated, bizarre stories in order to not plant my crops by mistake in the winter. No. But people say that, and it's like, and people go, oh yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, they were just learning how to plant things. So I guess they needed these fantastically complicated stories. 4 different gospels, all these different adventures, bizarre Zeus doing this and
I know,
No,
it's
that's not why.
ludicrous. And when we look at things like Göbekli Tepe, I mean, it is a real affront to the lies we've been told about how primitive our so-called primitive
Yes.
our ancestors were. No, they were building amazing astronomical monuments like Göbekli Tepe back 12,000 years or 11,000 years ago. You know, it's insulting to say that's what these
Not just,
stories were all about.
not quote, just to do crops. Look,
Mm.
I'm not belittling, the technology of planting crops. Yes, that takes skill, it takes knowledge, it's passed down through generations, but we don't need these stories to know, oh, springtime comes after winter. It's just insulting, like you said. So, and why do you have to encode it in stories? And I'll just give, as short as I can. These are about our own internal landscape. Just as you are helping people to understand, well, you see, you have a lot of Sagittarius, and that means this, but your Sagittarius is here, or it's in this house, or this house, whatever. You've got this planet there. You're helping people to understand themselves. And I believe, I'm convinced, in fact, that the myths are helping us to understand our internal landscape, because these different figures, these different gods and goddesses, these different adventures are helping to show what we ourselves are struggling with.
Yes.
And in fact, it has to do with a suppression. Remember, I said, the plunge down, the suppression. It's not just that a divine spark comes down into a human body. I mean, that in itself is pretty profound and magnificent. But again, we don't need the myths, really, if you think about it, to have these complicated myths to know, well, we're born and we get a soul and then we die and our soul goes somewhere else. Okay. I can just kind of like live long enough and see that.
Yeah.
It's actually to reveal to us something that we ourselves suppress, that we ourselves psychologically don't know and resist the knowledge of, to wake us up to something that we are hiding from ourselves. And that is, this plunge down is not just that the spark comes from heaven and goes into a human body. It is that we tend to suppress our own authentic self. Unless conditions are really good in your childhood, there is a defense mechanism that can cause us to suppress and separate from our authentic self.
Yes.
Because of different kinds of pain that have to do with attachment to our parents, which is vital. I'm now, kind of paraphrasing what I've learned from cutting edge healers who explain that a child is so dependent on his or her parents. As we know, a 2-year-old just cannot say, I'm out of here, I don't like this family, I'm going to take I'm going to take all my stuff on my back and head out the door. I'm done with this stupid family. I'm 2 and I'm gone. It will not make it. It must attach to the parents. So when things are in some way messed up, the child will suppress its own self in order to preserve that attachment. It just is a survival instinct, but that suppression is very painful, and so painful that if I come up to someone, if I'm down there in Australia in a bar and I'm having a Foster's next to, a really, tough miner from Australia, and I say, hey, great beer, I really enjoy your country. And, we're all separated from our own authentic self when we're born. You got to get back in touch with your authentic self. What's he going to do? He's going to go, well, don't talk like rot to me. It's like, it makes me uncomfortable. I don't like it. It makes me want to like hit you or run away, because if it's true and I have suppressed it and I've got defense mechanisms that did that, those defense mechanisms are going to be like, yeah, he's touching on a very sensitive subject here. This is like the most painful thing, and I don't like it to be brought up, and I don't like to admit that I did that, that we had to do that to hold this thing together. So the myths I am convinced, are to show us this inner landscape. And those different defenders, they're playing a positive role, at least they're trying to.
Mm-hmm.
They suppressed for a positive reason, for survival.
Mm-hmm.
And yet they can hold us back from our true potential. And so the myths actually dramatize that with things like, gods and goddesses that go down to the underworld and just get buried, but then they come back. The myths are showing us that, and that method of using esoteric or metaphorical can get around those defenders.
Yes, well, it's like, I mean, my mother was a teacher, and you come from a family of teachers as well. And I remember my mother, it was very big when I was in primary school, that she was very into what she called object lessons, and getting a
Yes.
box or a post box or a video recorder or something, and having a lesson out of this metaphor of the object. And
Exactly.
it's the same principle, isn't it? And they're the lessons, they're the teaching that I remember more than anything else, because I can associate it with a story or with a picture or with an object. And it's the
Yes.
same. I mean, stars are the ultimate object lesson, aren't they? We look up,
Yes.
everybody sees them. They're all in the sky when we know what we're looking for, and the story that goes with them. And certainly, if you have a lot of Cancer in your chart, Cancer people are very drawn to storytelling as a means of learning, as a means of understanding, because it's based on the emotion, and Cancer is the sign to do with emotion. So if a story triggers emotion, especially for someone with a lot of Cancer, but everybody basically has this, if it strikes an emotional chord in me, then I remember it, just like an image we remember. That's why I invented, for everybody out there who knows me, my astro wheel, because it's easier to remember how the zodiac works if you can visualize something and see it. So it's like an object lesson too. So to me, when you talk about the myths and they're in the stars, and it has this beautiful ability to heal by revealing something to us, it's doing it, as you've suggested, in a gentle way that's not ripping our defenses away from us, but
Yes.
in a way that can subtly, sort of intrude into our subconscious to help us process things. But also I see it as being an object lesson, a visual and emotive story that can teach us as well.
Yes. No, that is a great connection to object lessons. And I've used this like example a million times, but I think it's a really good one when, for getting around those defenses, like you said, in a gentle way and causing that like light bulb to go off. One of the best and most memorable movies for that is the original Karate Kid, where Mr. Miyagi has to get through kind of the doubts and the low self-esteem and kind of issues that Ralph Macchio character, which is Daniel's son, had. And what does he use? Basically object lessons. He says, what? Wax the car, wax on, wax off. And in fact, it's such a powerful scene that Ralph Macchio, when he wrote his autobiography, he called it waxing on. Waxing on, because cool. He's waxing on, he's talking, we say I'm waxing poetic, but it also it goes back to, because it's so powerful when Mr. Miyagi says, you learn to wax the car, but you don't really know what I was teaching you, do you? I was teaching you something more than waxing the car. And now I'm going to reveal it to you. That is esoteric. That is the concept of esoteric. I've heard, I think it might have been the authors of Hamlet's Mill who said the definition of esoteric is where you learn something first and then you get the meaning later, and then the meaning hits you more powerfully.
Yeah. Yes.
And that's what Mr. Miyagi did with Daniel-san. He said, first learn this. And he said, now you actually already know something, but you don't know that you know it. Let me tell you what it means. And those object lessons is the same thing. Like, let me give you this object, and I'm going to relate it to, I don't know, a mathematical principle or something, but you learn it, with a box. Montessori actually does this. This is what Montessori does. Maria Montessori was like a master esoteric teacher. She came up with a cube that represents a binomial cubed or a trinomial cubed. And so a child will learn to put it together. And then the teacher will say, now I'm going to teach you A plus B cubed, and you actually already know it. And the child will go, what do you mean I already know it? Well, you know it because of this object that actually represents this complex thing. So that's, I believe, what the myths are doing to get around, because we don't necessarily have a psychological resistance to binomial cubing. Maybe some people do, but we do have a psychological resistance to being told that we've been separated from our own authentic self. And yet that is our main problem in this world, according to the myths.
Yeah.
That is our main problem. It is amazing. So anyway, we're going to do this, wonderful event where we'll look at the stars. I've got a few pictures from, past
Tell
events.
us a little bit about the event. Perhaps it's time now for us to talk about that. So we're going to get a lot more of these kinds of dialogues at Utah, or is it something different? Tell us a bit about what we can expect if we are interested in coming for the eclipse. And now I'll point out to everybody that it's happening during the eclipse on the 20th of April. It's 3 days, is it not, David? The 20th, 21st, and 22nd?
I think it actually goes through the 24th. I've got the web page on one of my slides, but it starts on the 20th, as you point out. And we always time them with a new moon because that's when the sky is really conducive for looking at the stars, because, the moon is pretty much out of the way. And that's when you do get a solar eclipse, is during a new moon, but it will not be
visible
in the location where we are. So if you want to go see the actual solar eclipse, I think you might have to travel out to the Pacific somewhere on a boat, but I haven't actually. I should know exactly the track of it.
So should I haven't looked it up yet.
Well, let's just edit that part out anyway.
That's right.
I don't want people to know that we don't know everything, but I'm joking. Yeah, it's April 20th through 24th in Bryce Canyon and Zion National Park in Utah in the United States. And we do a lot of hiking in these beautiful national parks. There is a little bit of time for some lectures. So I do give some lectures like this, but really, you can see my lectures on YouTube. There's lots of videos, or you can check out the courses, or you can buy the books. This is really a time to just actually interact in person. And same thing, you're going to be there. People can talk to you about whatever they want to talk about. You have tons of content on the internet, but it's not going to be, well, we're sitting down in chairs listening to lectures and it's formal. It's really more of a experience, this beautiful natural setting, and then we will go out and look at the stars. But there's also some special breath work. Brandon Powell is going to be there. There's also the Grimerica podcast guys will be there, and there's a lot of
you're going to play your didgeridoo.
Hiking. Yeah, there's jam sessions, there's partying. I mean, you can party, you can indulge as much or as little as you want but it's a kind of just hang out, and it's a pretty relaxed atmosphere. I would say it's very different from a traditional conference where, it's like, okay, 5 minutes till the next lecture, come on in, please take your seats, everyone be quiet. It's almost the opposite of that. So I do love to do those kinds of conferences too, the more formal conferences. There'll be a wonderful one coming up in October that I'll be part of with lots of different speakers. But this one is really more about just relaxed, casual. There is, ask me whatever questions you want, but there are a few presentations, but it's really more about, as I'll show you, some just amazing.
Yes, please do. Please do. I like that. I think, the chance to just explore the canyons for a start, and the chance to just get to know people from all walks of life. And I think that can be really really fun and a beautiful, relaxed way to explore, different knowledge bases, like yourself, Brandon, the Grimerica guys, myself. Yeah, it looks like it's going to be a great time. But if you've got some slides to share, we'd
Yeah,
love.
let me just show a couple of things to try and give people a taste of what it is. So I will share again, and people can probably see it already, but this is, press play. This is Bryce Canyon. This is a picture I took.
Beautiful.
It is amazing. It is geologically impressive. And this formation that's sticking up above the horizon there is called Thor's hammer. The god Thor is there right at that
Posed for
particular
you.
pot. Yeah, he's right there, but you usually can't see him unless I point him out. But actually, yeah, Thor is seen in the heavens. But when I say meet the gods in the stars, that's what I believe the myths are actually teaching to us. Through the gods are reflected in our inner landscape. All those dramas are going on. That's what I was kind of alluding to about the suppression of self. And really, I've got a few slides to show, gods who wield a thunderbolt weapon. I won't go too long on this, but this is an ancient vase with the god Zeus. Look at how this is the artwork of it. Look at that posture. Do you see how that posture was similar to the posture of Thor in that cartoon image? But that is actually, there's a constellation that matches that posture. That is the constellation that we call Hercules, who's the son of Zeus. I won't go too long into this. I've shown enough already, but you can see, look, this is all it's all the same kinds of connections that I was talking about with the goddess Artemis, but she's associated with a different constellation. I'm going to just skip over that, but there are other thunderbolt wielding gods besides Zeus, besides Thor. There's Indra of ancient India. There's Chak, who has he's a rain god of the Maya. He has an axe. I'm not going to go all into that. I'll just kind of skip over that. Because I've waxed on already, like Ralph Macchio, a little long. But let me give people a taste. This is Bryce Canyon. That's someone who looks like me, but much
with
younger.
the Grimerica t-shirt on, yes.
With a Grimerica t-shirt, yeah. That's me last year. My hair's grown a little bit since then. But this is Bryce Canyon. So we're going to visit 2 national parks. These are participants in one of these events. This was 2 years ago. This particular picture was taken, but that's what we do. I have some hikes that we can go on. They're not too strenuous. The food comes out to the location for us. It's just a big fun time. You can take your time, take as many pictures as you want, take pictures with Ksenia, take pictures with, the guys from Grimerica, take pictures with me. This is all Bryce Canyon. Look at how magnificent that is. I showed this on the Grimerica thing and I said, just for scale, can you see the person in this picture? Way down there. Then you can see the little trail. This is a part of Bryce Canyon that I believe
it feels a little bit claustrophobic, like those big walls.
This is some amazing geology. This is called Wall Street, this part of the trail. This is looking back up. This is, a picture that I just took. This is how just magnificent it is there. And then we also go to Zion Canyon. That's me at Zion. I took this picture when I was just kind of like scouting it out in advance before the other people showed up. But look at those towering walls. This is some of the most impressive, majestic geology in the world. And it's also some of the best stargazing. It's very dark skies. It's what we call the high desert, where there's not a lot of precipitation. So I can't guarantee clear skies, but I'm hoping. We've always had clear skies. We've always had good night sky stargazing. We do stay out one night. This is a crack at Zion Canyon, but just look at that striation. It's really quite a mystery. How all this.
Are you or the Grimerica guys, do you talk about the formation and the geology behind all of these things at the event as well?
I have some catastrophic theory that I subscribe to about this, and I have blogged about it in the past. I believe there was cataclysmic flooding on this planet. But no, we don't go into it that much. There's different angles on the theory. You know, a lot of people who go to these events are also big fans of my friend Randall Carlson. I've done a lot of events with Randall. He talks about Graham Hancock, catastrophic flooding. I may have some slightly different, you know, I mean, the mechanism we could argue about, but there's clearly been a catastrophe and this ties into the story of this ancient wisdom in the myths that, you know, what I've been talking about, people are probably like, how come I've never heard about this before? This was known in ancient times, at least by some people. I showed you some examples from ancient artwork, and it is present in the myths of cultures around the world, the most ancient myths, like the Gilgamesh epic or the pyramid texts of ancient Egypt, or the texts of ancient India, the Vedas, the earliest Vedas. And they're all using the same system. So where did it come from? Someone even more ancient than them. Well, what happened to the originators of it? Probably a terrible catastrophe happened on the earth. There was some time, I believe, even more ancient than the ancients that were taught about in school. The ancients, like ancient Egypt, they inherited this, and then they had to figure out what to do with it because something happened. So I believe this geology actually does tie in to the story, because I believe there was some kind of catastrophe. This isn't thousands of years of layers right here. This is something catastrophic. And in fact, when you look at some of the formations at Bryce Canyon, or Zion Canyon, you'll see, yeah, this is right near that crack, actually right below it. There's some pictographs. And so there's a pictograph site that I know of. I mean, it's not top secret or anything, but we'll walk out to that and see some of these pictographs, some of which I believe, and I'll show some slides why, may have some celestial connotations. But
you can see a goat there. That's
yeah, that's right. That's right. Actually, it may be Aries. It may be associated with Aries, which I believe this. Yeah, I believe this eclipse will be happening when the sun is in Aries and the moon passes in front of the sun.
That's right.
The new moon. Wow. This is also Zion. This is one of the hikes. There's different hikes. There's easier hikes that we all go on. Of course, they're all optional, but then there's other hikes that people can branch out and do. This one's called the Narrows. It's a slot canyon. As you can see, I went on that one. That's me kind of on the left side of it. But this is the river that goes down. It's called the Virgin River. It goes down through Zion Canyon. You know, these are all biblical names, by the way. Zion.
Yes.
So Virgin Mary. Like, this is all, guess what? It's all based on the stars. But
do you talk about
that? Well, so the Virgin is obviously Virgo, but that's a good question. I don't necessarily like relate everything at Zion to the stars, but you can see that the formations at Zion are all pretty much talking about biblical stories. But anyway, good question. I had to scratch my head. Not really. This is one of the hikes you can go on. But what I was getting to, I was trying to show this. This was like, there was massive amounts of water here. This is not something that happened over millions and millions of years. This happened when these rocks were soft, I believe. If you look at that, this is like, I mean, just look at that background.
Yes,
this is
incredible.
This is not something that happened to hard rock over millions and millions of years. This is something that happened to soft rock, probably in some kind of gigantic flood runoff or something. Yeah. And once again, for scale, these are big features. Look at these are people from the event from last year. Look at that, walking along, plodding through this majestic landscape. This is also Zion. This is part of the trail, one of the hikes that we do. Oh, I put this in. The Grimerica guys were joking with me about, are you going to wear your Speedo again? So I wanted to show some of the things.
What is this, April? Is that snow that I see in the background?
That is snow in the background. This is Last year we did it on April 10th. This year will be April 20th. So maybe it'll be a little
A bit warmer,
warmer.
a little bit less
10
snow.
days, 10 days warmer. I don't know. We're getting a ton of precipitation here in the western part of the United States right now, which means rain in California, but snow. I don't know. There might be a lot of snow on the ground, but so Brandon Powell, I'll show Brandon in a minute, but Brandon Powell, who's also one of the featured presenters, he's going to be leading us in Wim Hof breath work, but also he's a certified master Wim Hof instructor. So Wim Hof is the Iceman. You can look him up. His name is spelled W-I-M. I think it's probably properly pronounced more like Wim Hof, and his last name is H-O-F. And he's an elite athlete and a amazing, ice, cold work teacher and master teacher. And Brandon is one of his master instructors. Brandon is a level 3 Wim Hof instructor. I'll show a picture of Brandon, but he always sets up these ice baths. You can maybe see that there's ice on the top of that water.
Oh,
as you
yeah,
can see,
I can see
I'm
it.
getting
It looks cold.
I'm taking a breath. I'm taking a breath as I put my foot. I'm going, that is cold.
So everybody bring your bikinis, even though it's in April in
look, if you come, this is completely optional, but Brandon would probably give me a hard time since I'm one of the featured speakers if I don't go in and lead by example. But
good for you.
Also, he still gave me a hard time because he was like, after I got out, he said, "Hey, you did great, man. You were great. That was awesome. But you really want to have the water go all the way up to your jawline." Like,
No.
I was too high up out of the water. He was like, "No, your shoulders were out of the water. You got to get down to your jawline and just take breath. But you know what? I'm joking about it, but what are these techniques about? They're actually about clearing out those defenders. Those defenders that are protecting you from knowing your suppressed authentic self. You see, the defenders are the ones who, for good reasons, say, you can't do this, don't do that. Hey, we're going to die here. We're in cold water. You have to like quiet those voices because you're actually, Brandon's right there watching. He's a pro at this. He's going to make sure that you're not hyperventilating or panicking, but you can handle this. And what you start to realize is, I can quiet those other voices who are just trying to do their jobs, but those voices are keeping me from connection. These techniques have to do with recovery of self, just like the myths do. So that's why I put that in there. And this is me taking a plunge in the Virgin River, which is pretty cold in April.
I can imagine, yes.
This is also, look, it's completely optional, but that year we took a plunge in the Virgin River for the cold work instead of having ice baths. I just it's just beautiful. You don't have to go
under the water for.
Yeah, I was like hugging a rock to show how long I could, but I was actually trying to, calm those voices and just, get in touch with, hey, don't panic. You're okay. And I also want to show, okay, so I'm going to, so we go out at Bryce Canyon, we go out at night. I was going to skip ahead to the breathwork. I've got 2 more videos. This one shows, this is a time lapse from last year. We go out in Bryce Canyon and we look at the stars. You can see there's some clouds there, but they very, helpfully cleared, they cleared away for us. Yeah. And you can see, I bring my laser pointer out there and the stars come out and I start to point, this is a time lapse. So, I'm pointing out various stars. It looks like I've got like multiple, but that's actually Corvus the Crow, who's looking at Spica, or I think, how do you pronounce it?
I say Spica, but yes. Yeah.
Spica, yeah. That's actually Corvus looking at Spica or Spica in what constellation?
Now I've got to think. It's not tropical. It's in.
I know it's in sidereal. Yeah, it's in
the sidereal. It's
It's in the constellation of Virgo. It's in the
Thank you.
constellation
I
of
couldn't
Virgo.
think there because I just kept thinking Libra, Libra, Libra. Sorry.
Yeah, that's because of precession and sidereal versus tropical. But we will see Virgo. We will see. It depends on how late we stay out there, but we'll see. People can stay out as long as you want. So, yeah, there we are at Bryce Canyon. So we stay out one night at Bryce Canyon, and then I point out the stars. But there's also I thought I put in here the maybe I forgot to put it in. This is the details, but I did have a quick clip. If you want, I will. I'll quickly just show. Oops. I'll quickly just show the Brandon breathwork.
Yes, that'd be great.
Let me just do that. I've got a quick clip. I've just got to insert. Let me stop share. What I'll do is I'll stop sharing so people can't see me
What you're up
making the
to.
slide. Yeah. Let me insert the
Well, it looks amazing, and I see in that last slide that it's at Duck Creek Village, which is the cabins that we saw in the background while you were jumping into the cold water. So that's the accommodation. All food and transport is supplied once you get there. Obviously, you have to get there. And you come with your hiking gear and a bikini or bathers of any description if you're keen to have a go.
If you want to, you don't have to get in the water at all, but
yeah, why not? You might be tempted. Bring them with you anyway.
But for sure, you want to do the breath work, which I'm going to show. But yeah, I also wanted to show a little bit of the breath work, just briefly, because it's just such an amazing event. I haven't shown too much of Brandon Powell, but you can look him up and he will be there. He's just a wonderful person. And this whole event, it's a pretty casual, fun, and sometimes partying and even, dare I say, raucous atmosphere a little, it's pretty down to earth of an event. But I have gotten good feedback from people. I've asked, look, lay it on me if you didn't like it. And I just have one to read out. I'm sure she would be okay with me reading this. I loved every minute of Contact at the Cabin. It's Contact at, well, she just put CATC. It's Contact at the Cabin, but this particular one is Contact at the Canyons because of Bryce and Zion. CATC, Contact at the Canyons. The crew was fun and welcoming, and I thought that. And also I'm happy Ksenia gets to join. I think she'll love it and fit right in with everyone, as well as add the astrology perspective. Perfect complement to Star Myths, because they really do fit together. I haven't given you any breathing room to really interject how well they
do. Everybody can see that
together
on this channel.
But I just wanted to say it's a welcoming vibe. You may, I'm trying to kind of set expectations that it's there is some kind of casual, freewheeling, partying aspects to the event where it's not super formal, but it's welcoming. Everybody there is welcoming. It's non-judgmental. You can talk about really any subject. There's people who are into UFOs. There's people who are into Bigfoot. It's like you don't have to walk on eggshells at this conference, because even if I don't necessarily believe in UFOs, it's like everyone there is open-minded and not judgmental.
I love that. I think that's so empowering to be in that kind of environment. Beautiful.
I just wanted to throw that in, and I want to show this breath work because it ties in with that same theme that I was talking about, the cold work, which is a little more, let's say, maybe intimidating than the breath work. But they're both getting at the same thing. They're both trying to help, I believe, this is my interpretation of it, help us to calm those voices of those kind of protective defenders, those old algorithms that maybe we picked up in childhood that maybe trying to suppress authentic self because they believe that in order to survive, they need to do that. But through the centuries, humanity has developed or been given these amazing practices and disciplines like meditation, like martial arts, things like Tai Chi, where we can still some of those voices and allow that authentic self to re-emerge, that buried self, like the goddess that went down to the underworld in the Mesopotamian myth, and comes back, that pattern. And so the breath work, I am convinced, helps us to do that, just as the cold work does. But if you don't want to do the cold work, you don't have to. But I really encourage everyone to do the breath work. Brandon leads it every morning, and I'm just going to share the screen one more time and show. And it's not like 5 a.m. either. It's like 8 a.m.
Good to hear. Good to hear. I'm not an early
I will.
person.
Yeah, I will get up. I'll say this. I will get up at 5 a.m. and take people out to look at the early morning stars each morning who want to do it. But that's usually like 4 or 5 people. Most people are nighttime people. But this is, let me show. Can you see my screen? This is Brandon leading a little breath work. And I think it might even have, if I take my earbuds, headphones out, we'll actually maybe be able to hear it. Yeah. Can you hear it?
Yes, a little bit.
This is Brandon leading the breath work. So everybody is, some are on the floor.
You're on the didgeridoo there. And so they're breathing in time.
Yes. Yes. You can hear him. He's telling you to breathe in and out.
We haven't really got sound at this end, but can see not really. But that's okay. We can see what's going on.
Well, he's saying fully in and out, and he's doing it along with the rhythm, and he's getting you in. Yeah, he's getting you into this, state. And then, I won't spoil he's a master at this. So, but basically it involves, he gives the whole, explanation of what he's doing. But we do that every morning, and it really is, it's quite powerful and transformative. So
love it. Well, David, I cannot wait to join you and everybody else in Utah this April. It looks so wonderful, and very, very excited. So everybody, if you would like to join David and myself at the Utah Contact at the Cabin retreat, or Contact at the Canyon retreat, then the links are in the description below. Just head there, sign up, and we'll look forward to sharing some myths and stars, some hiking, some breath work, and some cold ice baths with you guys in Utah this April. David, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your wonderful and vast knowledge of the myths and the stars with us once again. We always love having you here at Guiding Star Astrology, and we'll see you in Utah in April.
Thanks so much. I'm really looking forward to it.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.